Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Seeley, and I'm an MBA student here at MIT Sloan. It is my pleasure to introduce our panel this afternoon, Gymnastics Rebalancing Act, AI Judging, Analytics, and Economics. Our panelists today are Lili Leung, President and CEO of USA Gymnastics, Brody Malone, World Champion Gymnast and Olympic Medalist, Mohini Bhardwaj, Olympic medalist, NCAA champion, and owner of OOA Gymnastics, and Josh Dixon, VC partner at Profluence Sports Capital, national team alumni, and NCAA champion. Our panel will be moderated by Jessica O'Byrne, founder and co-host of Gymnastic. The panel will run for 40 minutes, and we will leave 5 minutes at the end for questions. Please submit any of your questions through the Cadence app. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Jessica.
Okay. Thank you all for being here. We're so excited to be invited to this conference. And so let's kick it off by talking about what kind of data and analytics are being used to help athletes train and reach peak performance. And I wanted to start by asking about Lili, about the AI judging, because you're on the FIG Executive Committee, that's the International Gymnastics Federation, and you just flew in. What can you tell us?
So FIG, the International Gymnastics Federation, has had a relationship with Fujitsu now for a few years. Fujitsu has been developing an AI judging program. It has been used in competition in terms of we still have human judges judging, but in case if there's an inquiry or there's a question about the scoring, then what's known as the superior jury of the judges can then look at the AI judging done by Fujitsu to help make a decision in terms of how that final score should end up. So it is being utilized on a limited basis, and we may see it being utilized a bit more. From a personal opinion standpoint, I think if you can take out uncertainty in sport and uncertainty in judging, that's not a bad thing.
What do you guys, the athletes, think of this? Mo and Brody, how do you feel about we affectionately call it robot judging, you guys, but it's not actually robots, even though I would love to see actual robots, but it's not. But what do you guys think of it?
Go ahead. From just speaking from the women's perspective or the women's side, we are very related to the theatrics and just the different things that really make your routine stand out. And I think that that's more of like a personal perspective for judging that the human portion of the judging will do, but that's something that AI won't. So I feel like maybe for the men it's a little bit more technical, but there's just it's just different for the women because you're very focused on the performance, I guess.
Yeah, and I would say for us as well, I mean, you definitely kind of lose that artistry element. So I kind of have mixed feelings about it. I appreciate that we can use it in the inquiry process. So, for example, if I'm competing my high bar routine, I think this actually happened at the Olympics. I did a skill, it's called a Tkachev, where I basically fling my body over the bar in a straight position. I'm supposed to be completely straight. But if my hips have any angle greater than 30 degrees, then the value for my skill goes from a layout Tkachev to a piked Tkachev. So in gymnastics, you can inquire on the difficulty, like your start value of your routine. So we noticed when my score came up and we saw my difficulty that it was a 10th low, so we were able to inquire, and then they went back and used the AI to visually look at my body and measure the angle as I was traveling over the bar to see what value the skill should actually get. So I think it's really cool to utilize it in those aspects, but again, you kind of also are losing the artistry if you move fully to the AI judging.
Yeah. So Jessica, sorry, can I just give the audience a little bit of perspective on judging in gymnastics? Yeah. Because there's what we call a D score and an E score. D score being difficulty, E score being execution. The E score is where artistry kind of comes out in terms of what Mohini is talking about. And the D score is actually the adding up of the difficulty of the moves that Brody was talking about. And so I actually believe that the AI judging can really help on the difficulty side of things. I agree with Mohini, execution, that maybe perhaps is better for a human to judge, because I'm not sure if Fujitsu is going to be able to really understand performance and artistry on things. And so just to give you guys a little bit of background, that's why scores are above 10.0, because we had 2 scores being added together, the D and the E score.
Yeah, I was going to say on the difficulty component, it certainly helps and enhances kind of the quantitative or the definity of it, and then even more so on even line calling of like on vault or on floor. Like full stop, it should be used to, is this gymnast in or out? And it takes away that subjectivity, because as we see in tennis and court sports, like it's now all automated. So at a minimum, the implementation there, and then it obviously from a almost like business case or fan perspective, it's like, oh, like let's watch the replay here, and it's like, oh, let's wait for it type of situation. So there's kind of 2 different components of the AI integration into what it's doing in the sport.
Since we've been here this weekend, a lot of people have asked, like, where does the AI judging, or we call it Fujitsu judging, it's a judging support system. There's a separate system that is the judging evaluation program, which is done by a PhD math person, like, you know, an MIT kind of guy, and that took like 10, 15 years to do, and it's amazing, and it makes sure that the judges are the most accurate judges that judge at the highest level. But this, Fujitsu is the support system for the judges, so they don't have to use it, but they can, like Brody said, if there's an inquiry, they can look at what Fujitsu says and how it's identified a skill. So in terms of like Josh was saying, the business case, or how this will be used in the future to enhance like a fan experience, where do you think this stands in terms of it being adopted wider and the sharing of data and all that kind of stuff?
So I do think there's an opportunity all around within the sport of gymnastics to enhance the spectator experience in arena, and potentially this can be used to be able to do that exactly, to help the audience understand, okay, why did that athlete, why did that gymnast score what they scored? Why did they give them this score in difficulty? Why did Brody not get credit for that Tkachev that he did when he should have? And so I think it can help educate spectators. Educating spectators is a good thing to bring them closer and to engage with the sport. So I think there's a lot of room and opportunity there for our sport to be able to leverage things like that. So you know, if you look at the Fujitsu system, you can tell exactly, it's really quite interesting in terms of the exact angle of body alignment, the exact angle of your hips when someone lands on a vault. Was their foot turned in a little bit on a jump on floor exercise? And so there's a lot of detailed information that I think would help spectators understand why the scores end up in terms of what they are, and really enhance that spectator experience.
Yeah, I would agree on the fan engagement side of it. It's every 4 years there's a new code, there's new sets of rules, there's different iterations. Like that's hard enough as it is if you're in the sport and coaching it and doing it. Now it's like, okay, now let's throw that on millions of fans every 4 years during the Olympic Games. Like, oh shoot, I have to learn about this again and I still don't get it. 10.0 doesn't exist. So either in arena, on screen, it's bridging that educational gap that literally exists every 4 years to then, okay, like I can understand it faster, better, and a machine is telling me to then view or participate in the product, which is what you all do so brilliantly, better and differently.
And this kind of leads into my next question. I wanted to ask Mo if you could tell your story about what happened at your floor final, because that leads into, this is kind of like how this could be used to also empower the athlete and put the athlete first, which is what I think Lili has done so brilliantly taking over at USA Gymnastics. And also this is how, you know, computer learning can also do this, and that leads into the study that Brody can talk about. But yeah, tell us the story.
I mean, it's somewhat kind of similar to what he was explaining with about his Tkachev and the pike. But I qualified for floor finals in my Olympic Games, and I missed out on a bronze medal because I didn't complete the jump all the way around. And the judges basically have kind of two options. So this is where it's where it's kind of subjective. They had the option of either giving me credit for the skill and taking the deduction, or just not giving me credit for the skill whatsoever, and taking a deduction for overturning. So they basically had two different ways that they could take these deductions. And had there been something that was AI generated that could measure and exactly tell them where my foot placement was, would have made a difference. So I feel like I kind of missed out on a medal, but I was also telling them, in all honesty, I was the better athlete on the floor that day, but not really the better athlete to get that medal. So that was kind of my experience, and I think it would just be a benefit for the athletes to take out some of this guessing, some of the inquiries at the end of competitions, and specifically for these high-level competitions like World Championships and Olympic Games. These things that happen in receiving medals, it really affects the athletes, it affects their future, their lives. I mean, everything that goes on post-sport, what kind of contracts they can maybe get, how much more money can they make from their experience, it all ties into that. And so it's important for us to have concrete answers, I think, when it's something so detailed and specific that you could measure.
And so right now, the judging information is not published anywhere. So in figure skating, they publish their protocols. So you can see why judges got to these conclusions. But in gymnastics right now, that's not done. So this leads to this amazing project that the USOPC did for several sports, but specifically for the men. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, so this was probably one of the coolest things that we've done in the past. I believe it started the past quad. So like she was saying, there's not a lot of data about what deductions the judges are actually taking. So when we're at a competition, when they give us our final score, we get our difficulty value and our execution value, and those are added together, and that's how we get our final score. But that's pretty much all the information that we have access to. So something really cool that we did this past quad was we sent a data analyst and one of our top judges to all of the major competitions throughout the quad, and basically they just sat in the stands, and the judge would look around and judge as many routines as he could just with pencil and paper. And then they would go through and plug in each skill that each athlete did and the deductions that our judge had, and they basically just made a giant spreadsheet. And what that was able to do is give us an understanding of what deductions judges are taking for particular skills. So this is super, super valuable information for the athletes, because we know now that, okay, this is a skill that we were thinking about working on to put into our routine, but this is how the judges are judging it. They're being a little bit harsher here because maybe this is a little bit harder skill, or so it's really good information to have as far as building our routines and our routine construction. And I believe it directly translated to us winning a medal in Paris, because we knew going into it what skills we needed to do and what skills were getting the most deductions and how we needed to train those skills to maximize our score. So it was very, very helpful information. But again, that's on a small scale. That's just us sending a judge and our data guy, and they're sitting in the stands. They're not even sitting where the judges are sitting. So having access to that kind of information on a broader scale would be even more beneficial.
And also shout out to Sho Nakamori and Elliot Schwartz, who I think Elliot Schwartz has spoken at this conference before, actually. So they are the ones that did that project. And also the men's program for,
Yeah, can I add to that in terms of from a selection standpoint? And you might have been going there next anyway, but we use the data in terms of scoring throughout the year to figure out how we're going to select the Olympic teams, as you might imagine. Tons and tons of scores and data that we're looking at. And just from a men's standpoint, we ran dozens of iterations in terms of the combination of what combination of athletes would be the highest scoring team score at the Olympics. Ultimately, we look at the team medal being the most important medal, and that drives decision making as to which athletes are being selected for the Olympic team. Obviously, Brody was selected, as he should have been. But I know there was a bit of controversy in terms of Steven Nedorosik being selected because he's a specialist in one event. And so a lot of questions we were getting around, why would you select a single event specialist, basically that you were putting the Olympic team medal on the shoulders of one particular event. And I mean, like I said, we ran dozens of different iterations, and Steven's name came up pretty much every single time in terms of the right combination of team members. And ultimately, we did select the right team. The men won bronze, the first team medal since 2008, so it was actually an incredible success in Paris. Many thanks to Brody. But I think the other piece to mention is that not a single athlete in team finals for men competed in all-around.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. You wouldn't have thought that, but so how the team, and it was 3 up, 3 down in terms of counting. That means every single athlete's score counted at the team finals during the Olympics, made for a very nerve-wracking experience. But ultimately, data was what drove our team selection, and it ultimately we ended up in the right selection of team utilizing all that data.
Mm-hmm. And this brings me to the next question, which is about kind of fan engagement, because like you mentioned, like gymnastics is always the most popular sport. There's 13 million viewers for gymnastics, and college gymnastics right now is incredibly popular with ranking with men's basketball and women's basketball in terms of viewership during college season, which is right now. You can watch Friday night, by the way. Friday Night Heights. But I wanted to ask about kind of carrying this momentum through all 4 years instead of it just being the Olympics, like carrying it through the whole 4 years to the next Olympics, and how we can kind of capitalize on the data and all of the stuff we have to grow the sport, and also fan engagement, because we were talking about watching in Paris, and
yeah.
Paris had interesting things. They had like actors dressing up and doing things it was very artistic. Yes, but what do you think we can do?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot that we can do. I mean, luckily gymnastics, I'm going to be biased, but I would say the stats also back this up, is gymnastics is the #1 sport during the Olympic Games. 8 out of the top 10 viewed segments on NBC in Paris, gymnastics. We blew the other sports out of the water in terms of social media engagement and following as well, in terms of growth, as well as engagement at that point in time. And so while we're sitting pretty amongst the other Olympic sports in terms of having really hit these high engagement numbers, there's a lot more that can be done. And we happen to be, as a key Olympic sport, there's a lot of focus on us once every 4 years. But something that we are working really hard on, and you'll sometimes hear me say flame to flame in terms of how can we be top of mind during those non-Olympic years as well. And so that is something that strategically, it's one of our strategic initiatives to really work on leading up to LA. Next games, hometown games, a ton of, I would say, exponentially more opportunity than in Olympic Games outside of your home country. And so hopefully you'll see some things in terms of us being on more often outside of the Olympics, perhaps around corporate partnership engagement activation with them, as well as potentially a docuseries of sorts. And so we think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say Lily hit it on the head when she started with that's the consumer education of the product of, okay, like this is how we're better educating the public of the scoring system, or like you said, if it's so video driven, like here are all the different ways that we can disseminate now this content beyond just the Olympic Games or just the World Championships or even a US Championships to make, like you said, the in-between years just more engaging. Because we see a great NCAA system, we see a great Olympic Games, but that chasm in between is hasn't fully been bridged. So I think gymnastics is at a really interesting inflection point. My curiosity is always around like the business of it. It's like, okay, the commercial investment, the strategic partnerships. Are we growing maybe nascent leagues outside of NCAA and our national team programs? So I think gymnastics is at that literal precipice right now, and it'll be really exciting heading into a domestic games to really see what can happen.
Yeah. There is, you did bring up nascent leagues. So I
yes.
should mention, I am the advisor for a women's pro league which is in its very, very beginning stages, which would have a couple of teams, athlete ownership, and it's been an interesting process to see because it's never existed before, and so it's hard to get people to wrap their hands around something that hasn't happened before. Like gymnastics has had like Bundesliga we can talk about and shows, but there's never really been a system where athletes make a living from doing gymnastics like there is for soccer and there is for all these things. USA Gymnastics has a really great stipend now that's excellent and equal for all, across all the disciplines, which is a huge improvement from the past, and they've done a great job. A pro league that's separate is something that really hasn't happened. So it's Giga is the name of it, and it's, you know, it's in the works. But can you guys talk about what you've done? Like, Brody, you've never done Bundesliga, but can you tell people about it and what makes it so exciting to watch?
Yeah, so it's different than your typical world championships, or even if you're watching NCAA gymnastics, where it's like head-to-head match play, basically. So say my team and the opposing team, we're on high bar. The opposing team gets to put up their first guy on high bar, and then the scores come in, and then my team gets to choose based off of that score. All right, who's the guy on our team that does high bar that can beat that score? And then you just pick your person, you put them in, and then it's head to head. And you don't, it's not the total like scores at the end that wins, it's head to head. So if I beat that guy, our team gets a point, which is a lot different than your typical gymnastics competition where the lineups are set, you know what order you're going in, and it's just based off of your final score. So it's really cool, really fun to watch, really engaging for the crowd. I know it's super popular in Europe. There's leagues in Germany and France, Italy. I've never personally done it. I might have the opportunity to do it later this year, and I think it would be really fun. But that's something that we could incorporate into the United States, I think, pretty easily. And it's fun because you don't have to, gymnastics doesn't really have an off season. So it's hard to stay in really tip-top shape year-round. And this gives you the opportunity to, you don't have to necessarily compete your highest level routines when you're going to these competitions. You can kind of water down, protect your body, so you're not, getting banged up year-round. And it's something that also would, help drive revenue for the athletes who are competing in it as well. And I think figuring out a way for gymnasts to make a living doing this is what's important. And I think there's a great opportunity for that.
Even at the grassroots level, I mean, my Olympics was in 2004, so there wasn't a lot of social media. There weren't a lot of things that you could do after you were done with the games related to your sport that kept you financially going. So I opened up a gymnastics gym because that's logically the easiest thing you can do, because you know that and it's been your life. But having just a league and showing more NCAA stuff and what you were just talking about, any of that stuff at the grassroots level is so important, because even just managing this business, it's all on this 4-year cycle. You really, really ramp up. And all other gyms at this grassroots level, they're doing the same thing. We really take the entire 4 years and plan for just that one date, and everything's kind of centered around that. And then it's like, how do you keep the retention of those students? And all of that just really trickles down to the bottom base that's just the building block of our sport.
That's a great point that Mohini brought up around just youth sports, having invested in a few companies that are literally growing the youth sports space, as we're seeing NIL push the importance of youth sports and that development pipeline. And then having gymnastics being literally a ranking sport, you do not need a matchup. It is judged. If you can take out some of the subjectivity around it, it's like on any given day, you can flip the script on the format of who's the best 10 to 14-year-old vaulter this coming Saturday. Here's this tech product or platform that can do that. You're driving community, you're driving youth engagement, you're driving club engagement. So from grassroots level, obviously we started talking about the highest level of what we're doing here, but so much of even USAG's mandate is growing membership, how are we engaging more with youth sports so that who knows, maybe that Saturday vault champion is now incentivized or inspired more to be the next Brody, to be the next Mohini at the Olympic stage. So I think using the data platforms, different modalities to drive community engagement at the grassroots level can be like really integral and moving for the sport.
Yeah, because what you're seeing up here in terms of the folks sitting here, I call them the tip of the spear. They are the best of the best, and they make up 0.001% of our membership base. We have over 200,000 members, but there are over 5 million people engaging in the sport of gymnastics, participating in recreational gymnastics that we actually don't have that much engagement with, and that's something that we want to start doing. Is because there is a lot of opportunity. I completely agree with everything you guys are saying. There's a ton of opportunity for us to be able to start engaging with them, to widen our pipeline. The wider the grassroots pipeline is in that funnel, that means we have more talent at the tip of the spear level as well. And so there's a ton of opportunity. That's another strategic initiative of ours going into this next quadrennium, is to figure out ways to be able to engage with those 5 million plus recreational athletes out there, because that will drive the business. There's synergies there.
Yeah. In terms of how, like, the opportunities for fan engagement, one thing that I wanted to ask you about is, like, where are we with, like, freeing the data? This is my favorite phrase that I've picked up this weekend, is freeing the data. What do you think is, I think about the time going back to when, Marta Karolyi, which had her positives and her negatives, but she, talking about finding the person at the, needle in the haystack, she found a level 10 gymnast who was, a very good level 10 gymnast, and she was like, come to world championships, you're an elite now, and she became a world champion like that kind of stuff. Where is there that synergy between, like, the fan engagement opportunities, like AR interaction when you're watching, so you can see where is this person, what are the judges doing, who's in the lead, all of that stuff, that third screen experience maybe. My dream is AR, as you know. That week you can just put glasses on, you see it all at once. But where are we with, like, combining that, how it helps the strategy, like Brody was talking about with the program, and then getting the data from Fujitsu or the judging data in general?
I would say we're at the infancy stages of it. There's a ton of opportunity there. I think, like, I am all about democratizing data. I think that data are really, really good tool for us to be able to move the sport forward, not only from, injury prevention, from training, from selection of teams, but also in terms of all of these other consumer engagement, fan engagement, which doesn't exist yet, because there's a lot more data out there for us to be able to start utilizing, but it hasn't been unlocked yet. It hasn't been democratized yet. So yes, I would love to get to the point where Fujitsu and the FIG, the International Gymnastics Federation, would start releasing that data publicly. Perhaps that day will come sooner rather than later, hopefully. And it is something that we are talking about at the NGB level, the national governing body level as well, in terms of how we can utilize this to improve and to engage a wider marketplace, because like I said, there's millions of people out there that we haven't even touched yet, that we haven't connected with yet, and we can use data to do that.
Yeah. We have a couple of questions that I want to start to get to, because they involve the things we've been talking about. So one question is, if it can be proven in the future that AI can judge execution at the same level as a human, what is the argument to keep human judging? Is it just the comfort level of a traditional human judge?
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. So our sport tends to be run by traditionalists.
Old tired men.
They're not all men. I sit on the executive committee of the International Gymnastics Federation, and I come out of those meetings, I probably shouldn't say this publicly, but frustrated at times, because I really want to push the sport forward into the modern age. And there are a lot of traditionalists and purists who sit on the executive committee who aren't yet ready to do that. But there is, if AI can judge execution as well as a human can, there's not that much of an argument to keep human judges. Honestly, there isn't. It's just that that's how it's always been done. That's how that's what people are comfortable with. And so I think we need to get out of our comfort zone and start pushing the envelope on this. Because as I was saying before, I think taking out uncertainty is a good thing for the sport.
My dream, of course, you talked about a docuseries, and my dream for men's gymnastics especially, because they're at this point where it's like there's only a couple NCAA teams left, but they're so incredible, and once you see it in person, it will change your life. Like, you'll believe in, like, we can cure climate change after you see a high bar routine by Brody. But it is one of those things where I'm like, oh, I would love to see, like, something in a docuseries where we have, like, there is a component where we compare, like, here's the judging, and here's the E-score even from an AI judge. And then you have that all, like, you see the potential that doesn't exist yet, but we show it in a show that you could see how it could be in the future. I'm just throwing it out there in case anyone wants to do that.
I also think it's interesting from the standpoint of it just brings score transparency, because that's something that's really not there. You have to do, I don't even know the inquiry process anymore, but it's, you got to do the inquiry and then submit money, and then you actually never see, like, the full thing. So it's just like, it takes away kind of the cryptic, hush-hush nature of scoring in general, and maybe that in bridging the chasm between traditionalists and where Lily wants to take it, it's like, hey, let's just verify that these human judges are, like, not too far off of what automation can do to help maybe be that middle ground. But bottom line, I still think, like, score transparency is needed in the sport. And again, for, like, the fan, it's very helpful. Like, oh, like, you're not looking at European judges being harder on Americans or vice versa. It is very, there's equality here.
Oh, I'm all about lifting that veil of secrecy.
Yeah.
And don't get me started on the inquiry process of things. For those of you who saw the Olympics, the whole bronze medal situation is ongoing. But
Yeah. Did you have something you want to add?
No, I was just going to say the European judges are harder on us.
Well,
there's some truth to that.
when you're judging, there is that human perspective, and the judges don't get every single deduction in real time. It's hard because our sport happens so fast, and you have to have an eye for it. So then what's the argument if we have something AI that's doing that E-score, and they see every single deduction? Then now we're looking at everybody's score dropping significantly, because if it's AI, they're going to catch everything that a human wouldn't in real time. And then that kind of alienates people that are watching the sport too, because they want to see big scores. They want to see that highlight. I guess I just asked kind of a question instead of answering anything.
It would also keep the competition moving more quickly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pauses in competition because the judges are trying to figure out what score to give. And I actually think it would help the athletes if it kept competition moving more quickly as well. So there's a lot of benefits to it. And I do think at one point in time, it's hopefully sooner rather than later, we will get to the point where judging will be done by AI. It's starting to move there. I would like it to move a little bit more quickly.
Yeah. I think like when I think of watching and, like, the drama of gymnastics, I think a part of the drama is, like, you know, the NBC loves that close-up of the judges and seeing. So I'm like, I think there's a way to, like, to do AI for objectivity and D-score especially. Like, you guys all give examples of times, even in Paris, like, there would not have been this controversy if Fujitsu potentially had done the D-score or the line judging like tennis. That would have solved the whole problem. So there's a potential to have the drama of the judges. They're doing maybe, like, the artistry checklist, because we can't lose the artistry, but also the D-score, and then you can keep, you know, some of the traditional things, since we can't bring back suspenders, which is still my favorite thing about the traditional gymnastics. Brody will not wear the suspenders. You're not for the suspenders.
I'll do it.
You'll do it? All right.
That's a safety hazard.
Exactly.
Oh my God, can you imagine them? You crash
Gymnastics
and they,
is a little bit
like,
harder now than
that is
when they
true.
were doing suspenders.
If gymnasts are constantly focused on scoring to impress the judges, does that lower the incentive to innovate and try new routines in the sport?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. So, like we were talking about, every 4 years the code changes. So basically what they do is they take the code of points and they make slight little rule changes that change the values of skills to encourage people to start doing more skills in those sorts of element groups. And basically our job as gymnasts is to produce the highest score possible. So we have to play according to the rules that they give us to get the highest potential score that we can. So we can only really work within the parameters that we're given within the rules. So, I mean, it does take away the element of, trying new things and trying to, advance the sport forward to a certain extent.
We have another question about how has NIL impacted the sport of gymnastics and what opportunities and challenges has it created? And I was just talking to Josh about another deal that Olivia Dunn was an elite gymnast for many years, which people may not know, but and now she is, yes, a brand unto herself, but competing at LSU. But yeah, how has that changed the landscape?
You want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I could start with it. Lily's obviously a little bit more in the trenches of it, but I think it opens. It's open for the wild, wild west. Obviously, still not regulated to the extent I think it should be, as the U.S. As Congress is kind of stepping into that now. But it hopefully informs coaches, programs, athletic departments of, oh, hey, now we can actually come up with different programming, sell sponsorship against this, drive different or better community engagement to, at least from the NCAA men's side of things, grow fan base. I want to see people in these arenas because it's actually just really cool to be there. Gymnastics is almost a side note to that. And leaning into partnerships and sponsorships and how you're doing it, how you're engaging the community. I'll always use South Carolina women's basketball as an example. People are in that stadium, one, because they're an amazing program, but it's you're part of community and there's an ethos behind it. Gymnastics, at least on the men's side in the collegiate realm, doesn't have that, and I feel like lifting the lid on NIL to be able to get really creative of how you're engaging, who's sponsoring, who's leaning in, who's making these investments so you can grow 3, 4, 5 more programs. I think you can now think that way, whether or not coaches are doing it. It is a no. It's not happening. It can be and should be, but at least that runway is there now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're all for putting more money in our athletes' pockets. I mean, one thing that I am really proud of is when I started at USA Gymnastics, the total budget in terms of going to athletes was under $1 million, about $942, if my memory serves me correct, and we're now over $2.2 million in terms of budget allocated. So we have reallocated a big chunk of our budget for money to go to our athletes, and we want to keep on doing that. We want to be able to do it even more than what we're doing now, and so NIL is also a way for our athletes to be able to make a living off of the sport. I mean, they train as much, if not more, than a full-time job in terms of hours a week, so they're not able to hold a job to be able to put money in their pocket. And so if NIL does that for them, that's fantastic. So we are completely, completely supportive of that.
We have another question. Could AI judging be used to capture different angles for judges to evaluate execution deductions that they can't see from where they are sitting? I love this question.
We were just talking about this before, so Lily can take this one.
No, thanks. So, yes, AI judging has the ability to basically capture kind of 360 angles for the most part. And it gives judges the ability and the tool to see angles that they wouldn't normally be able to see. So let me give you an example in terms of what happened in Paris. For those of you who are familiar with the Jordan bronze medal situation and the Romanian athlete potentially stepping out of bounds, the judges actually had a worse camera angle to make a judgment call as to whether the Romanian stepped out of bounds as opposed to all the viewers on TV. So the viewers on TV had a better camera angle to make that judgment call than the actual judges who were making that call, which is ludicrous to me. It's crazy that that's the case. And so if AI has the ability to do that, which they should have the ability to do that, then by all means, let's bring it on. Let's bring it on, because then we probably wouldn't have had the fiasco that we had in Paris.
How do you guys feel about that? E-scores. That's all I can think about, E-scores.
They're gonna kill us.
Judges are going to kill me after this, actually.
I would say, from the athlete perspective, it also you work so hard to make sure you're presenting the right product, and to take out the question of okay, one, how seriously are these judges taking it? Are they held to the same standard for just score parity and equity across the board? That would actually give you comfort to know that there's a check and balance between how you're being literally judged versus your competitors to make a national team, let alone your national team to win at a world stage. So from the athlete headspace point of view, it's oh, this actually helps me focus in on my craft more than maybe somewhere in the back of my mind, someone seated, oh yeah, Josh, that judge doesn't like you, or they don't like that team, or it just takes it out of that lexicon is gone, that thinking is done. So I think it helps almost purify your focus in what you're doing.
What will fans do if they can't blame the Russian judge? I don't know what, Josh, how dare you?
Yeah.
But we were talking about this, you guys would have to approach.
Thankfully, they're sanctioned and can't compete. So.
Oh, that's true. Well, no, they just did a thing
For the time
today.
being,
Yes.
that's correct. No, so
Today.
what was that?
Oh, the thing happened today where they are allowing their neutral athletes.
Neutral athletes.
Neutral.
Yes, they have to be new, and this is actually was a topic on the agenda for the recent executive committee meeting that I was at last week. And so yes, neutral athletes, they still cannot compete under the Russian and Belarusian flags.
This brings
that is still the
Melnikova
case.
back for you, the guys that are gymnastics fans. So Melnikova won the last Worlds when it's the small Worlds last time, and now will be able to compete, not for Russia, but as a neutral athlete, so yeah. But we were talking about earlier about how you guys have to literally approach a judge, or Mo, you're a brevet judge, you were a brevet judge before, and you have to ask them, and they literally have to go through their papers to see what your deductions are.
Yeah. Typically
I
after
mean-
competitions, I'll go up to the judges and I'll be like, hey, how was my routine? What'd you have off? What do I need to work on? And then they'll flip through their paper notebook and we'll just go through the whole routine together.
Yeah, and there's no filing it or anything after. Like Mo, you were
No.
saying.
It's just the paperwork. You don't have to turn that portion in. I don't think, unless that's changed. But also just going back and reviewing those scores and doing that as a judge in real time. You're writing, you're watching, you're thinking, you're trying to remember those deductions. And sometimes when you're writing down those skills and taking those deductions, you're just making a quick tally mark, and you don't have the time to write down that it was, not a pointed toe or lack of amplitude and that type of stuff. So even when you ask and they're going back to look at stuff, they have to really, really think and almost replay the routine in their mind and hope that they remember everything. But also when you're dealing with these high-level judges, they've spent maybe days in advance watching what your routines were and doing your research so that they can actually do that. But I think it's just very hard to keep anything accurate.
Mm-hmm. We have a question here that is very relevant. Is AI judging the solution to the criticisms on judging and inconsistency across the NCAA? In the sport that is rapidly increasing viewership, would this harm or enhance the sport? And you three have all done NCAA gymnastics, NCAA champions. Thoughts?
I mean, if you take out the subjectivity of it,
Yeah.
you're going to have more consistent results. I mean, that's just how it's going to be across the board. But I don't know. It was just like we were talking about earlier. I mean, if you take the judges out of it, then you kind of lose maybe the emphasis on the artistry of the sport. So you can look at it from both angles, for sure.
Yeah, I think if you even liken it to other sports, we're going to the ACC, those refs are much harder than this, or the SEC. It's it's same. Now you're just you're literally taking that out of the equation to focus back on the artistry of the sport and the actual craziness of what's going on. So I think it takes that talking point out of it to hone in on the craft itself.
Well, NCAA is a completely different animal compared to FIG. And so honestly, I think whatever they decide is, I mean, they can do whatever they want because it's completely different. And why not make it more fun? Why not continue to be able to have that subjectivity? I mean, like, maybe bring some drama, discuss what's going on with the judges. That stuff is kind of welcome because it's almost like a reality show. And watching NCAA gymnastics, you're watching their entire season unfold. So, I mean, I think that would be almost like fun to have both, you know?
Yeah, and to Mo's point, like NCAA is a totally different set of judges. Not for men's, it's brevet. It's the brevet judging system, the same as elite Olympics. But yeah, for NCAA, it's anarchy, and they don't even have an NCAA supervisor of referees, it would be called. And it is, the judging is wild, which makes it fun to watch, honestly.
That's why it's the best.
It's very entertaining. So we have a little, like 30 seconds left. I want to leave Lily. Is there anything that you would like to close out this session with?
Well, I guess I would say, obviously, the conversation is really focused on AI judging. And I think that in terms of moving forward in this space, like baby steps will be key because we do tend to be a traditional sport run by traditional people. And like, let's start with using AI as a tool for our judges to be able to support our judges and have them use it as like a backup to be able to refer to the scores if there are questions and inquiries and things like that. I think there is a lot of room for improvement here. I think taking out subjectivity in the sport, again, as I said before, is a good thing. And so I'm actually really excited about the opportunity that lies ahead with judging, as well as utilizing data to kind of wrap things up in terms of from fan engagement piece, as well as us using data for even further improved team selections and injury prevention and how to put together routines to be able to score the highest. So, you know, I know this whole conference is about data analytics, and I think there's a ton of opportunity within our sport for us to further improve on that.
All right. Perfect. Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks for being here.